شريعة، بأي دين، بأي دولة يا سيد حسن؟
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal. These are today's top stories. Prime Minister Tamam Salam in the Defense Ministry in Yerzeh hails the role of the military institution in achieving stability and security in the country. Army Commander General Jean Ahwagé warns during a meeting with a delegation from the Future Parliamentary Bloc the paralysis of the cabinet harms the country's security. And at least 20 members of Syria's Druze minority were killed in a shooting with Al-Qaeda in affiliation with Al-Nusra Front in northwestern Syria. Prime Minister Tamam Salam is hailing the role of the military institution in achieving stability and security in Lebanon, while saluting its ongoing efforts to protect the country against foreign threats. He made his remarks from the Defense Ministry in Yerzeh, where he met with Minister Samir Muqbil, Army Commander General Jean Ahwagé, and other military officials. Salam says that they have succeeded in uprooting all plots to create strife in Lebanon, as it has faced and still faces the threat of Israel. While addressing the situation along Lebanon's eastern border, Salam says he is seeking to supply the military with modern weapons to help it protect the border. Progressive Socialist Party leader MP Walid Jumblat is stressing that the cabinet is the sole authority concerned with the appointment of civil servants. Jumblat criticized some journalists without naming them, considering they have a wide imagination, he said. He reaffirmed via his Twitter account that he backs the Lebanese army and the state security agencies. The Dirzi chief has been speaking with Speaker Nabih Berri to prevent cabinet paralysis over the appointment of high-ranking security and military officials. The government plunged in a further crisis last week when it failed to agree on the appointments controversy. Free Patriotic Movement chief MP Michel Aoun has bluntly rejected any attempt to extend the terms of the officials. He has been lobbying for political consensus on the appointment of Commander Regiment Chief Brigadier General Shamil Rukuz, his son-in-law, as Army Chief and part of a package for the appointment of other top security officers. Army Commander General Jean Ahwagé warned that the paralysis of the cabinet harms the country's security, as ministers should continue to endorse decisions to fortify the situation in Lebanon. Ahwagé's remarks come during a meeting with a delegation from the Future Bloc Parliamentary. He stressed that the situation in the northeastern border town of Arsel is stable, noting that the residents of the town are staunch supporters of the army. The army chief soothed fears over battles between jihadists and Hezbollah fighters backed by Syrian army troops, saying clashes are on the Syrian side of the outskirts. He pointed out that the army will continue to conduct patrols in the village and on high alert, according to the military estimates. Hezbollah, just to remind you, has succeeded recently in achieving gains against Al-Qaeda affiliate Al-Nusra Front and the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, known as ISIS, of course, on the outskirts of Syria's Al-Qalamun, compelling fighters to retreat from their positions. At least 20 members of Syria's Druze minority were killed in a shooting with Al-Qaeda in affiliation with Al-Nusra Front in northwestern Syria. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the shooting in Qalb Lawza village in Idlib province took place after villagers protested when a Tunisian Al-Nusra leader tried to seize a house belonging to a Dirzi resident, claiming he was loyal to the regime. The Tunisian leader accused the Druze residents of the village of blasphemy and opened fire, killing at least 20 people. Some villagers returned fire, killing 3 members of Al-Nusra. Syria's official news agency accuses Al-Nusra and allied Islamist rebel group Ahrar al-Sham of an appalling massacre committed against the people of Qalb Lawza. After 11 weeks of airstrikes that have yet failed to change the balance of power in Yemen, Saudi Arabia is running out of options to restore President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi's exiled government to Sana'a. Despite the destruction of much of their heavy weaponry, the Houthi militia and army forces loyal to former President Ali Abdullah Saleh control most of the country's populated west and still daily attack Saudi territory with mortar fire on missiles. The possibility of a ground operation in support of the ragtag local groups still fighting the Houthis in Aden, Taiz, Marib and Ad-Dahla appears to have been discounted by the Saudis and their allies in an Arab coalition from early on. Riyadh may soon have to face an unpalatable choice: accept the de facto control of its foes over Sana'a and cut a deal, or keep fighting with the risk of Yemen sinking into total chaos, becoming a permanent threat to Saudi security. Coming up next, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan ends his 4 days of silence, calling for the formation of a new government. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the 4:20 o'clock news on Future Television. U.S. President Barack Obama approves the deployment of 450 more U.S. military trainers to Iraq. A bid to reverse the Islamic State group gains. The White House says the forces will join an already 3,100-strong mission to train the Iraqi army and Sunni tribal fighters. The new contingent will focus on wresting back control of provincial capital Ramadi, with the Islamic State seized in May, punching a giant hole in Obama's strategy to defeat and degrade the jihadist group. The new U.S. training contingent will be based at the Qaddum Air Base, perched between jihadist-held Ramadi and Fallujah. That puts U.S. non-combat troops within striking distance of Islamic State fighters, but officials say it also makes recruitment of Sunni tribal fighters much easier. South Korean workers sprayed disinfectant around classrooms in a school in the South Korean capital as 14 new cases of the Middle East respiratory syndrome known as MERS are reported, bringing the total to 120, with so far 10 fatalities. A superintendent at Seoul Metropolitan Office of Education says that every school within the capital will be fumigated by the end of this week as part of measures to prevent the spread of MERS. A joint South Korean World Health Organization mission recommends that schools be reopened as they were unlikely to spread the disease, just as school boards recommended more should be shut. The spread of the disease has stirred up public fear and confusion, and health officials are criticized for lack of transparency and failing to contain the spread. About 200 men, women and children fleeing the war gathered by the border in Syria's Tel Abyad district just across the border from the Turkish town of Akashkal. Turkey's emergency management agency says more than 6,000 Syrians have crossed into Turkey in the past week, fleeing fighting between ISIS and Kurdish forces near the northern Syrian city of Tel Abyad. The refugees cross the border town of Akakshel, where they get checked for health problems before being transferred to camps or allowed to join relatives in Turkey. Turkey shares a border with the conflict-ridden country and already hosts 1.8 million Syrian refugees. Kurdish fighters are closing in on the Islamic State group in Tel Abyad, capturing towns and villages in the country's northeast, supported by U.S.-led airstrikes. And still on that, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is calling for the formation of a new coalition government as soon as possible, ending almost 4 days of unusual silence after legislative polls saw a blow to his authority. Erdogan insists that the election result does not mean Turkey will remain without a government. Commentators are now expecting a coalition, although Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu says that snap elections were not ruled out should the Turks fail. Erdogan wanted the AKP Justice and Development Party to win a supermajority to push a new constitution that would give him reinforced powers as president. This plan has now been scuttled for the foreseeable future. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says that Greece has committed to work intensively with international creditors to resolve outstanding issues holding up its access to vital bailout loans. The European Union countries and the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, known as the CLAC, met in Brussels for a second day of talks. The creditors have made clear that Greece must improve on offers of reforms it would introduce in exchange for the $8.1 billion in the bailout loans it needs to repay debts due at the end of this month. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius says any deal with Iran must be verifiable, and there are no guarantees yet on Iran's nuclear program. Now, he says that they have to be able to verify these sites. They don't yet have any certainty of that. France is for an agreement with the Iranians because both should move towards peace talks, Fabius said. Nobody can reproach them for wanting to move towards peace, but the agreements must be verifiable, solid, robust, and today they still don't have those guarantees. All right, we have to cut this نشرة short to go live to LF leader سمير جعجع.
الدروز هونيك بغض النظر عن حيثياتها أو خلفياتها، بغض النظر عن بعض الواقعات، يعني بغض النظر عن كل شيء آخر، غير مقبولة بكل المقاييس، وأقل شيء بصح عليها توصيف مجزرة. نحن أصلا ضد نظام بشار الأسد لأنه كان يقوم بهيك أعمال، مش لأنه اسمه نظام بشار الأسد. نحن أي حدا بيقوم بهيك أعمال بنكون ضده كمان. طبعا نحن ما بنقوم بردود فعل، بمعنى مش إنه بنصير مع بشار الأسد إذا التقى حدا يعمل هيك أعمال، لا، بنصير ضده وضد هداك. اليوم المطلوب من قيادات المعارضة السورية كبير، إن كان القيادات السياسية أو القيادات العسكرية على الأرض. المطلوب بعد هالمجزرة إنه ترتفع أصوات منهم تتقول بالضبط شو صار، والأهم من هيك تتاخد كل الإجراءات اللازمة بحق مرتكبي هالمجزرة، والأهم من هيك تتخذ كل الإجراءات اللازمة مشان ما يعود يتكرر هالأمر ولا بأي مكان من الأمكنة. أنا بدي أدعي على كل الدول، دول المنطقة أو غير المنطقة يلي عم تدعم المعارضة السورية، يتدخلوا بقوة تيوضعوا حد لبعض المجموعات يلي عم بتقوم بهيك أعمال، لأنه ما انشغل كل هالشغل للتخلص من إجرام معين تنرجع نعيش هالإجرام ولو بإيد أخرى مختلفة.
Iran and 6 major powers reached a framework nuclear deal on April 2nd. Am I back? I'm sorry, we didn't really know how that worked. Back to our story. Iran and 6 major powers reached a framework nuclear deal on April 2nd in Lausanne, Switzerland, and are seeking to strike a final agreement by the end of the month under which Iran would restrain its nuclear program in exchange for relief from economic sanctions. Former IMF Managing Director Dominique Strauss-Kahn will hope to put his legal woes behind him as a French court prepares to deliver its verdict in his pimping trial. The 3-week trial in February included lurid details about Strauss-Kahn's sex life and centered on whether he took a principal role in planning the kinds of parties and whether he knew the women attending them were often prostitutes. These are charges that Strauss-Kahn has always denied, but the case against him appeared to be a dealt blow when 4 lawyers and said they were giving up damage claims, saying his charge was too hard to prove. In his summing up, the French prosecutor called for Strauss-Kahn to be acquitted. He initially said he should not be tried, recommendation overruled by investigating magistrates. If convicted, the one-time French presidential hopeful, who acknowledged during questioning he enjoyed libertine parties, could face 10 years in prison and a fine of up to 1.5 million euros. And on that note, we mark the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Prime Minister Tamam Salam in the Defense Ministry in Yerzeh hails the role of the military institution in achieving stability and security in Lebanon. Army Commander General Jean Ahwajeh warns during a meeting with a delegation from the Future Parliamentary Bloc that the paralysis of the cabinet harms the country's security. And at least 20 members of Syria's Derzi minority were killed in a shooting with Al-Qaeda in affiliation with Al-Nusra Front in northwestern Syria. Those are your Thursday headlines live on Future Television. Catch us again tomorrow for all the latest. Good night.
بأي حق، بأي شريعة، بأي دين، بأي دولة يا سيد حسن؟